Coogs house. All right, so Houston's had 2 really big recruiting weekends, but only a couple of commits to show for it. Just one this week. Are the Houston Cougars in trouble?
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Cougars, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. Whether a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Which makes first listen each and every day. In this case, it might be your second listen, even third listen. We got some bonus episodes out there, including this one for you. If you want to join the conversation down below, but you don't know what to say, tell us where your favorite state you've traveled to. Obviously, your favorite state would be Texas, but your favorite state you traveled to would be. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. We got more on that later. Great place to manage your wealth. But I want to give some updates on recruiting in the first segment that I think are burning for everyone. I want to do talk about the Big 12 spending and what Brett Yormark has said about that. And then it's a bonus episode, so the third segment will be brief, to say the least. But I got some thoughts on something I want to do the rest of the summer on that one as well. So first things first. Recruiting issues for Houston and the Cougs here. I don't think there are issues. We've got a pair of important weekends. Keisean Henderson in between them said that he is officially not going to go visit anywhere else. He's just a Houston Cougar. All of that went well. As we sit here on the afternoon of the 17th, we've got just one firm commitment out of Bryson Castile. And I think people are wondering, like, what does that mean? First of all, Castile, tremendous athlete, listed as an athlete. He's kind of a hybrid safety linebacker type. Some people, I think, are projecting him because of the hitter that he is and the importance of the linebacker position. He's a linebacker. I'm here to tell you, I think he's a linebacker. He's probably more of a coverage linebacker. I do think he hits you hard. I don't mean to say that, but I do think that he's much more of that ilk, right? Think of a box safety, maybe an outside the box linebacker, somewhere in that kind of thing, where he is that kind of an athlete, that kind of a hitter. I had him down as a DB in my notes after watching some video. Again, thinking safety, totally get the linebacker vibe out of it. I see both sides of that coin. Either way, Houston's excited to have him, and I think people are wondering, wait a second, he's the only guy we've got. So what does that mean about this Houston Cougar football program? Well, I'm here to tell you that, whether it's Noriel Dominguez, Jaden Warren, Paris Melvin, Houston's feeling really good about the guys that have come through here. But in modern college recruiting, you're also letting guys take their other visits, right? And that's honestly just kind of the way things go in modern college football. I don't think that's anything to be horribly worried about. I do think, though, it's worth pointing out, Houston feels that they've got some what we'll call a softer commitment or a behind-the-scenes commitment or that from several guys. I mean, full disclosure, we talk about athlete Paris Melvin, four-star athlete, crazy wiggle, 6 foot, $170. He could play corner. I think he's more of a slot guy. Just can't keep hands on him in press. He's too shaky. Can't keep up with him with the ball in his hands. He's too wiggly. Just kind of a slippery, snake kind of receiver. His name is Paris Melvin, and you had people on the staff tweeting out gifs of the Eiffel Tower as if they were like getting some good news right over the weekend. I'm not saying you have to buy into all of that or think all. I'm saying when that comes from people that have like insight into the NIL world, right? When you're worried about Paris Melvin's also looking at A&M and Texas Tech, what does that mean for the Cougs? I think that the NIL guy saying that means like we're gonna be okay, right? I also think we look at like the pursuit of Jaden Warren. Jaden Warren has set his commitment date for July 13th, 7/1/3. He's also looking at TCU and SMU, and a guy from Iowa Colony looking at TCU, SMU in Houston and putting his commitment date on 7/1/3 after being so enthusiastic over the weekend he just had. I think those things all line up. And I'm not telling you have to buy into all of that kind of stuff and all that kind of smoke. I'm telling you, it's more than just smoke, though. When there's smoke, there's fire. Some of these guys from the weekend are going to commit. Jaden Warren himself, I should point out, is like crazy fast. Crazy fast. Don't confuse that with being a track star. He's not like only a track guy playing football, but he does go 10-1 in the 100. He does go 21 flat in the 200. He was on state record 5A, 4x1, and 4x4 teams. The dude has some burners for feet, but he also has good footwork. He also gets down and breaks. He's also listed at 185 pounds. One place at him at 190. Big, strong kid. And when you watch him, when you look at him with his 4x4 team, he sticks out. He's a lot different looking athlete than those guys are as far as size and structure goes. Now, I do think that you have other guys too that feel pretty good about their weekends. I mentioned Norel Dominguez, a linebacker from a couple weeks ago, as well. As I pull my notes up here, a linebacker from a couple weeks ago, they've got they're feeling pretty good about the Holmes kid as well. I've heard mixed things on Jalen Battle. I think they feel pretty good about him. I think he's a great fit. He's from Edmond, Oklahoma. He's a little bit further away. I think there's some fear that someone else may talk to him as well. Chris Addison is a guy in their backyard. He's a Louisiana kid, got connections to the Tulane crew and all of that. And I think those are things working in Houston's favor. Devin Robinson's a kid from Memorial High School in Pasadena, right? They're feeling pretty good about those kinds of things, the way they fit the program as well. I think what's interesting, though, is when you look at the last weekend that Keisean had, Keisean being the kind of guy that he is, they ultimately, like, you had Keisean being very active on campus and taking his official visit in a very intentional weekend as a guy that has been a firm commitment as a 5-star quarterback, taking that leadership role. You had other guys come through like Pililete, Primus. You also had guys like we mentioned Holmes and we mentioned Melvin. We should point out that Castile was over that weekend with those guys as well. And all of them felt the vibe of what Keisean brought. You also, I should point out, get the same kind of understanding when you talk to people on the staff, people on the inside. Everyone involved in the program seems to feel like there was a lot of positive momentum from the people on campus the last 2 weekends. This upcoming weekend we'll preview at some point too. You got another handful of 3- and 4-star guys coming onto campus to look at the Coogs. Some of them are undecided. Ashton Roden, Freddie Wilson, etc. Some of them are decided. You're trying to flip Gerald Mays or whatever, right? But I do think when you look at each of those guys, the more people you get on campus that are shaking hands, that are getting introduced to the staff, that are meeting and getting to know Keisean, those guys tend to think very highly of the program. I don't think it's any accident that these commitment days are all set for after official visit seasons are over, right? That's very normal. I don't think that's the reason to sound the alarm bells, though, that some people seem to have. I think you got to wait it out and wait the process. These are high school kids. This is the one time you get to do this as a high school kid and really see all the things, right? I just feel like ultimately you got to give it a second. There's going to be a bunch of big-time commitments over the course of the summer. Now, of course, it's going to time up where they all happen at once and become like, from a content thing, it's all happening at one time. But I do think that Houston's having a really strong summer, even if the official commitment numbers may not be quite where the average person wants, right? Because Houston's big recruiting thing, as we talked about yesterday with Richie and Jake and Spencer, right now it's just total number of recruits. The guys they've got are ranked really, really high, but their total number is maybe not quite as high. Speaking of not quite as high, I do want to talk some of a second about what Brett Yormark said about the Big 12, and I want to talk about what I have as an idea for the rest of the summer. But first, before we get too far, today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. If you ever check your bank account, you wonder, where did all the money go? Where'd it go? Between dining, eating out, online shopping, entertainment, whatever you're doing, it's easy to lose track of where all those things go. And that's why Monarch Money comes in as your personal CFO, giving you full visibility of your control of your finances. Now, it's not just a budgeting app, it's a complete control of your financial. It's a complete financial control center. Just one-stop shopping, managing all of your things. Again, teacher, coach, podcaster, all in one place, one dashboard. Focus all your things in one spot so you can stop just managing money and start building real wealth. Take the control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code Locked On College for $20 for 50% off. Well, 50% off at monarchmoney.com. It's monarchmoney.com, code Locked On College for half off your first full year. Park Rangers Locked On Coogs here. I want to talk a little bit about what Brett Yormark said earlier this week, into the weekend, about the new house settlement and the money. And I think people were kind of wondering how the dollars are going to get divided up and all of that. Yormark has said very clearly that he's going to leave it up to the schools to determine how to spend their portion of that revenue share. He says it's a school by school decision. I do think that is a good thing for Houston. Now, Yormark himself said that the common distribution of this, unless lawsuits in Title IX change it, will be that there'll be 75% of the money will go towards football, 15% towards basketball. You'll have roughly 5% towards women's basketball and roughly 5% to your Olympic sports. That's what they're envisioning most schools doing, but that is not going to be a required breakdown. Now, while that number as a whole will increase a little bit each year as TV revenues and stuff go up and just the dollar goes right differently, I kind of think about this in two ways. One, I think it's really good for Houston as a school with a basketball program that really does bring in important dollars and cents. They get to use that money however they see fit, right? I think that's really important. The second thing I think, though, is that ultimately, this is going to be interesting to see how the conference does this school by school, because while this money was supposed to level the playing field, right, ultimately, you have a school that just says, hey, we're going to say screw everything but this program and put all their money into that program, right? You could have a Texas Tech of the world or a Baylor of the world or whatever. So we're going to put 95% into football, actually. We're going to put almost 20, the full 20 in there. And that's a very different proposition. And it's a little bit different game. I do wish that, I think this punting is nice because the Big 12 is a conference where every school has different priorities. I will say, though, that while that's the case for the conference, and Houston has different priorities than Kansas State has different priorities than Kansas has different priorities than Baylor has different priorities than Arizona State has different priorities than Utah, than BYU, etc. Right? I don't want to act like it would not be nice to all have the same set of standards, right? That standard would theoretically lead to things, standards being standard. It would standardize where this conference stands. It also would kind of mean that, hey, Tech, if you're going to be in the Big 12, you have to spend this much money on football and this much money on whatever. Or, hey, Kansas State, if you're going to be in the Big 12, you have to spend this much money on basketball or whatever. And I feel like that's not a bad idea. And I don't know. I think there's like that theoretical kind of way that goes to me where you spend that money in that way. But I also feel fairly firmly that Houston's going to spend money in ways that help elevate the basketball and football programs. Now, I've also been in favor of it, and Yormark said that this is the way that he sees it going unless some Title IX suits make the money shift to where it's more of a true 50-50 split, as opposed to the way it goes right now. And I've said this on the Big 12 squad. I'll say it again. Ultimately, the beauty of college sports is that you root for laundry, right? You're rooting for people that wear the Houston colors. You're rooting for people that wear the Houston logos. You're rooting for Houston across the chest. We can disagree on what font it's in, but that's what you're rooting for, right? And with that being the case, I see valid argument in Title IX saying they deserve half of that revenue money, right? Yes, we understand that like football is the biggest revenue driver and March Madness can be a gigantic revenue driver. We also know there's a lot more money put into those two things to make them big revenue things, right? We've seen the exponential increase of like women's college basketball, or we just saw the great women's softball, right? Once you start putting a little bit of investment into those things, right? The other part of this, though, is that, yes, I'm going to be cheering for Connor Wegman this fall, but I cheered for Donovan Smith, and I cheered for Zion Chris, and I cheered for Clayton Tune, I cheered for Greg Ward, I cheered for Kevin Cobb, I cheered for whoever put on the jersey. And the spoiler is, I'm going to cheer for whoever puts on the softball uniform, the volleyball uniform, the women's soccer uniform. I'm going to cheer for them too, because it says Houston across the chest. It says Cougars across the chest. It has a little Cougar emblem. If it's got, it's got the same value, even if I don't maybe watch it. Now, if the Houston Cougar softball program is killing it and I'm watching them in the College World Series, you bet I'm turning it on to watch it. But I got a golf hat on right now. It's not that I watch a lot of golf. It's that it's a Houston Cougar golf hat, right? It's about cheering on the program. Like you can look at it right now. He's got the UH on his deal right there, right? That's part of the fun. It's part of the program is he's got U of H on his shirt. And I think that that's the argument Title IX is making, right? The Title IX argument here is that the revenues need to be split evenly because the revenues are more about people cheer for their schools. People from Kentucky will cheer for Kentucky. People from Tennessee will cheer from Tennessee. People from Houston will cheer for Houston, but people from Lubbock will cheer for Tech, and people from Waco will cheer for Baylor, and that's who they're going to cheer for, really no matter who the athletes are. Individual athlete dollars cheering for specific athletes will always and obviously be much more about the NIL dollars, name, image, likeness. That's what that's supposed to be, right? So if you have a strong affinity for a running back, a setter, a center, a pitcher, whomever, you can find a way to donate to their NIL funds. You can find a sponsorship opportunity for them through NIL, right? That makes way more sense because that's more about their name, their image, their likeness. Hopefully you didn't hear my toddler running around in the background. I think that that's where that goes. Where the dollars for the school goes should go to the name on the front of the jersey, right? The image on the front of the jersey, right? And that's how I see this breaking down. I've got people DM me all the time that I'm wrong on this, and you're free to disagree with me, right? That's totally fine. But that's how I see the split happening. Now, I want to talk about one other thing in the third segment that I think should happen more in the third segment. So we'll talk about that in 1 second. And we're back to Locked on Coogs and Parker Ainsworth. And I have an idea for third segment. So this is a bonus episode after all, right? So we're giving you a little bit more than called for on a typical day. But I had this, I want this to become more like a radio show, a little bit back and forth, more interactive with audience members. But it is also FCC airwaves. I want to make sure we're staying somewhat PG. So I'm going to ask you to send video takes or audio recording to yourself, giving takes on the Houston Cougars to locoogspod@gmail.com. Send those in. We'll download those. We'll upload those. We'll interact with those somewhat like their callers on the radio. Again, that's locoogspod@gmail.com. Got a couple of those coming in, including one that kind of started my whole little soapboxy spiel there about splitting up the Big 12, or the Big 12 and splitting up of revenues and so on. So make sure you do those things. Send those in. We'll get those third segments rolling with those. Could do some thought experimenting kind of stuff, some more fun kind of stuff, whatever you think necessary. We'll obviously vet them and then put them on. So again, locoogspod@gmail.com is where you want to send those kinds of things. Thanks again for tuning into this bonus episode of Locked On Coogs. Locked On Coogs, the primary Locked On podcast. I'm your team every day. Go Coogs.